this week's God Squad Upfront. Here's where we discuss big issues and trending topics. If you're ready, so are we.
My name is Hamza Al-Derawi. I'm 31 years old. I'm currently in Gaza. I'm a Gaza resident. I have finished my Bachelor of Arts, my BA in English language in 2014, and currently I'm doing my MBA, Master's Business Administration. For the moment, I have finished the courses, and I'll begin in the thesis soon, Bismillah. And I'm a father to a son and a daughter. My son is 3.5 years old. My daughter is 6 months old. And you could say that I have a Bachelor of Arts in Wars. I have lived 4 destructive wars in Gaza, beginning in 2007, 2008, then 2012 aggression, then 2014, and hope to be the final one is 2021. So 4 destructive wars in less than 14 years. I have witnessed them all. I have been living here. And my childhood, I spent it, and I lived my childhood next to an Israeli settlement in Gaza before they left Gaza. So from age, like since I was born till age 17, I was living next to an Israeli settlement in Gaza.
How does that uh, how does that feel? I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but I've never talked to someone who a Palestinian Muslim that lives next to an Israeli settlement. How is that? How is that? Is there
Uh,
communication? Is it normal? Is it abnormal?
well, don't ask because it's so tough to remember those days. Actually, like since my childhood, I have seen the torturing. I have seen the difficult life under the occupation. Personally, our house was raided tens of times by the Israeli soldiers at night, mainly after midnight. Like they would storm the house. Uh, Tens of soldiers, fully armed and full of weapons. They will storm the house after midnight, having their dogs, the police dogs and those wild dogs, and then they will be barking inside the house. So we will be sleeping, and like I was a child, and this would freak us out. And then they have bulldozed our land twice. Our land was full. Our farm was full of olive trees and full of different fruits trees, and was bulldozed twice. Uh, like this is from one side. From another side, that shooting all the time and randomly shooting all the time. Of course, our house like had many bullets during the shooting. Our water tanks, like they usually above the roof, they were shot many times, and every time like we will be suffering the lack of water. And I remember like several once or twice I heard them in our neighbor's house, and they have arrested our neighbors. And then a few days later they came to our house and they have arrested my elder brothers. Like they arrested them for almost 1 week, and then they left them. But like the idea that they will come at after midnight. uh, Not to forget the days of the second intifada, the days of 2000, once there was the uprising in Gaza, or the second intifada, we call it, that they were shooting all the time. Tens of people were killed, hundreds or thousands were injured. and like they're only 300 meters away from our house, and I see the ambulances taking them. I see the Palestinian young like throwing rocks at the settlement, and I see the Israeli soldiers shooting. I have seen the tanks like following those young, and I remember actually like I used to study in a different area than I where I used to live. So like going directly from our house, crossing the settlement to my school, it usually took around 15 minutes walking. But after the road was closed, like the settlement had blocked the road, totally closed, so we have to go around like around 3 hours to go. Yep. So like if you know, or like if you hear Salahuddin Street, the main street in Gaza, and this street that connects Gaza from the north to the south, like from Rafah south to Beit Hanun or Erez checkpoint into the north. So all of this is connected by Salahuddin Street. I used to live just very close to Salahuddin Street, near to Net Sarim settlement. So Net Sarim settlement is one of the settlements that used to be in Gaza. I used to live next to Net Sarim settlement. Just behind Net Sarim settlement is my school that I went there during my childhood. But after the road was blocked, like my house, as I said, is 10 to 15 minutes away walking, then I have to go around to the beach road or to the sea road, to the coastal road. It's also the same idea, connecting Gaza from north to the south, but from along the beach. So we have to go all the way around to the coastal road and then come back to the school. We didn't last for long because like it's quite tough and like this difficult for us. But then I was lucky to study in the American school. We used to have an American school. Actually, it's still till today. I was one of the lucky students who used to study at the American school in my childhood, like after grade 6 till grade 11. But that was in Beit Lahia. Like I'm living in the middle area, and this school is in the northeast part of Gaza Strip. So the same way, but this school used to provide a bus that would fetch us from home and then take us to school and send us back. But the same idea. After the road was closed, instead of just passing Salahuddin Street and passing Net Sarim settlement, we had to go backward to the middle area and then to the coastal road and then go to the school in Beit Lahia. So like this was one of the difficult days we have to live. And I just want to add one point that if Maghrib comes, or let's say if sunsets comes, and our area would be like monsters outside. No one would bear or would dare to move out, because if any moving body outside, whether it's a human, whether it's dogs, whether it's cats, animals, it will be shot. And mostly they will be shooting randomly without any reason. So we will just, at night, we would listen and we would be listening to the shooting outside. And if someone gets sick at night, this was the most difficult part. If someone like gets sick, whether he has to suffer till morning comes or have to call the Red Cross and to call the ambulances, and the ambulances would be afraid to come to the area unless they will coordinate with the Red Cross, and this will take like very long time until they get approval from the Israeli side. So yeah, that like someone gets sick at night or needs to be hospitalized, then this would be of the impossible things to happen for an ambulance to come. Or even if a family have its own car, they won't take the risk to run the car and just leave to the hospital. It's very dangerous. They will immediately shoot at the car.
Does this continue? This still happens?
After 2005, the settlements, the Israeli settlements have left from Gaza. So it's not going on in Gaza till this moment, but in West Bank, yes, in West Bank is still going on the same, because there are many settlements that are being built on the Palestinian lands in the West Bank, and still the same situation is going on. I have seen women that have been like they passed away, at the checkpoints in the West Bank, because they are not allowed to go to the hospital, or they are not allowed to cross the crossing or the checkpoints that are made by the Israeli authorities. They will say that this checkpoint is closed, so you have to go back. And they never respected that this is like an urgent condition or an urgent case. Many of the pregnant ladies have delivered their babies at the checkpoints while waiting for approval to cross to go to the hospital. And many of the children, their cases, like, they have become worse. They needed to be hospitalized, and on the way they would be stopped by the checkpoints and won't be approved to go. Many of them as well have been arrested at the checkpoints. Like, someone is going to the hospital, and instead of giving approval or allowing the ambulance to take them to the hospital, then they will arrest them under any excuse like they have.
Why are there no hospitals in Gaza or in West Bank? I feel like I know the answer to this, but it's also important for people to know why.
There are hospitals. Well, like in Gaza, there are few main hospitals, 7 main hospitals in Gaza. But Gaza has been under siege for
Many
14
years.
years now.
Mhm.
Yeah, Gaza has been under siege for 14 years at this moment, since 2007. And since then, of course, the medical or the health system has become fragile. No equipment, no medical equipment is allowed to be entered to Gaza. No basic medicines. I'm translating a piece of a study for one of my friends, and he's interviewing the Ministry of Health officials and the doctors who are responsible for the cancer patients. And like every day, I translate 1 or 2 pieces or documents. Like the emphasis that the basic medicines for cancer patients are not allowed to be entered to Gaza by the Israeli authorities. So even during the humanitarian missions that are sent to Gaza, the Israelis would allow only the normal or the general medicines, but the basic ones, the sensitive ones, they won't allow it.
So it seems like what you're describing is a process by which there is excessive agitation, discomfort, the lack of inclusion, the lack of resources. It becomes so frustrating that it's kind of a genocide of
Yes,
sorts. And
yeah,
there was something that you mentioned that really shocked me. In America, years ago, there was like, this bus is for white people, this bus is for black people, and same with water fountains. And when I was in Jerusalem one time, I wanted to go to the shopping area. So I got on a bus, and everyone on the bus looked at me as if they were in shock. And I couldn't figure out what's wrong with these people. Why are they looking at me like they were in shock? And then I found out that I had gotten on the wrong bus. So you still have buses that are for certain groups of people. Palestinians aren't allowed to ride in Jewish buses only. I mean, what's that about?
you're totally right, and it's still going on in the West Bank. In Gaza, as we don't have
Right.
any soldiers or any Israelis inside the Gaza, but they are sieging Gaza from the surrounding. Well,
Mhm.
at the moment, it is still going on in the West Bank. There are certain areas in the West Bank that there are racism, uh, even in dealing with the Palestinian people and dealing with the Israeli people, such as there are wide roads are set to be used for the Israelis for the Zionists, for the settlers who are inside the settlements of inside the settlements that are built on the Palestinian lands. And there are very small passages or very narrow passages. These are set for the Palestinian people, and these passages, they are very narrow. They are not enough for two people to be moving next to each other, only enough for one person to be moving inside, and like one followed by the other. And this would be fenced, so fence will be around it, and it will, every couple hundreds of meters you will have the Israeli checkpoint, the Israeli watchtower, military watchtower, being set there, and it is full of snipers, full of Israeli soldiers who are armed, and like if they want to shoot any Palestinian, then they are under their target, and it's easy hunt for them. At the same time, allowing the wide roads for the Israelis to use, the ones who are living in the same area, the ones like let's say in this area that has some of it of the Palestinians and some of the Israeli settlements, the road will be divided 2/3 or 3/4 for the Israeli use and less than 1/4 for the Palestinian use. And same thing, the resources for water. Palestinians wouldn't allow, the Israelis wouldn't allow the Palestinians from access to drinking water, and mostly they will destroy their water pipelines, water networks, irrigation networks in most of the areas in the West Bank, especially the areas that are threatened to be confiscated, and the lands that are threatened to be stolen for the settlement expansion. So yes, the racism is still going on, even in Jerusalem, and in riding the buses. There are buses that are for the use of the Israelis, and there are buses that for the use of the Arabs, or let's say for the Palestinians there. And if you ride if you ride an Israeli bus, you will be lucky to go out alive from there, because like if a Palestinian rides that bus, then they will assault him and they will attack him, as it's happening here daily.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's so shameful, and we have to ask ourselves, is there no one watching? I mean, is there no one on the Israeli side with a sense of justice in the parliament to even say this is racism, that we can't continue like that? I mean, is there anyone coming to the defense of the Palestinians amongst in the Israeli government, in the cabinet?
Well, Israelis are Israelis all the time, and even like if any of their cabinets change the personals, here we're meeting, we're having a new Israeli Prime Minister, Bennett, who's becoming the new Israeli Prime Minister, and the first statement he has said that I have killed lots of Arabs and I have killed lots of Palestinians, and there is nothing wrong with that. So this is the first statement by the new coming Israeli Prime Minister. So I believe that they just follow and they continue their role of killing and assaulting Palestinians and just only changing faces, but the same ideology, the same aims, the same targets, the same procedures are taken by every government that is being following or successive to the previous government.
And he said that nothing would change. And the thing that shocked me is he had no shame to admit that he's responsible for the death of so many Arabs and so many Palestinians. He had no shame whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's when I began to wonder, is there no one watching what this man is saying? And why aren't our leaders, why aren't they saying something? And then when someone like Ilham Omar says something, that's when you hear their voices out loud, but they will not they will not respond to the head of a government that says he is proud to have committed genocide. I mean, it's
Well, there
mind
is
boggling.
there is a saying in Arabic that says, "Man amina al-uqubata asa al-adab." Like the one who doesn't fear the punishment will misbehave. So totally is like we could say that this is happening in Israel. No one in the international community is bringing Israel or Israeli leaders to be accountable or to bring them to the criminal court. And sadly, that like the international community, the policymakers in the world, they will set the rules and they will set the laws and implement them on everyone. When it comes to Israel, the use of veto will be present all the time. So and any regulations or any resolutions will be made for the Palestinian favor also will be stopped by the use of veto as well.
So, so we see all these nations, we see the French, we see the British, we see everyone ignoring this problem. When you see, for example, Americans or the American government not just ignoring these problems, but facilitating the Israeli government with all of these weapons, all of these weapons of mass destruction that are going to be used to eliminate Palestinian people. What do you think about America or the fact that it says it's a democracy?
Well, I could say, like I don't want to give my opinion, but I will say what I have seen on the ground, that every president that comes from the United States will be supporting Israel and will be facilitating the weapons or the selling of weapons, the selling of missiles, the selling of warplanes to be used against the Palestinians. And sadly, like this is happening all the time, and even like I was expecting to see difference from Joe Biden, like during his period, his election or his presidential period, but uh, I was so shocked during the aggression on Gaza that there was approval from the United States presidential office that there is approval of giving a new bargain or new weapons bargain for the Israeli occupation, and that was just during the latest aggression on Gaza. And like it's not enough, the people of Gaza are being killed every day, and I'm sure like you have heard about it, the 11 days that we in Gaza have lived, like tons, like hundreds of tons of weapons, hundreds of tons of bombs, like we were being grained with bombs, and like we were expecting someone in the international community would say it and like would appear on TV or appear in any in the international platforms and will say, Israel, you should stop doing this bloodshed against the Palestinians. But I was so shocked that Israel has approved to sell Israel. I mean, I was so shocked that the United States has approved to sell Israel the new bargain of weapons. And we all know,
Yeah,
where will Israel use its weapons? It won't use its weapons in any other countries except the Palestinians. And we have
that's right.
seen weapons and rockets or missiles that were used in Gaza internationally prohibited. And I remember some of them were used in Afghanistan during the American war in Afghanistan. So same missiles were used in Gaza, and those missiles, they are like internationally prohibited and to be used against the people of Palestine. And the vacuum bombs, some bombs like were part of like parts of the nuclear weapons were used in its components, and the vacuum bombs were mainly used in Gaza, and that has caused great destruction against the people of Gaza, and has like besides besides the destruction, it has affected the lives. Hundreds of lives like were killed, and almost 2,000 Palestinians were injured, and hundreds of those injured are still suffering and like they need years to for their recovery, and some of them will become lifelong disabled. And some of the children, one of the children, he has totally lost his eyes, both of his eyes. He's only around 6 or 7 years old, and he has totally lost both of his eyes.
Well, my opinion as an American is that for the United States and directly for President Biden to allow more military hardware to the Israeli government when they're committing acts of aggression unparalleled. When you talk about what one people are doing to another people in one nation, and then actually send them more weapons, it's like kicking a person down, and then the United States takes its foot and stomps on the Palestinian people after the Israeli government has knocked them down. And I think that if Americans are going to march and protest for civil rights in America, then we better start protesting for civil rights and human rights for people all over the world. And we can start with Palestine because that's right in our face, and we see the crimes that are being committed against the Palestinian people.
So
And yet we're paying money.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because in the US there is a lot of activism against for human rights, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for American citizens. And something I'm noticing more and more of is that there is a lot more support within our community in Durham, in North Carolina. There's a lot more on the parenting boards, on the sort of the middle class conversations that are going on. There's a lot more support for Palestinians. And so there's a discrepancy between US action and what the citizens of the United States want. There are a lot of pockets that have some really wild views on Israel and its role in the apocalypse, and that's a whole other thing. But in the area of North Carolina that we live in, which is pretty into civil rights and human rights in general, we're aware of the fact that, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement has tied itself to the lives of Palestinians and are saying explicitly and openly, Black Lives Matter. And the fact that Black Lives Matter also implies that Palestinian lives matter, that any group of people that is suffering an attempted genocide or systematic violence, systematic marginalization, and atrocity, right? There are atrocities being committed against Palestinians. And there are many in the United States who feel very conflicted, I think, about the role of Israel as a country, and utility as a country, and also the relationship that it has with Palestinians. I'm still really confused about why Israel seems to want to obliterate Palestinians. I have an idea of what that, of why that might be, but I'm apoplectic. I'm appalled at the fact that there is this very, very evident, very clear, very obvious atrocity that's being, acts of atrocity, one after the other, that's being committed. And I was curious about Israel's official position on that. There's no accountability, it seems. Nobody's saying,
because that
why
is their
are you bulldozing people's houses? Why are you making it? Why are women having, going into labor and having babies at checkpoints? How many children were killed in this last
Aggression in Gaza,
Russia?
67 children.
67 children.
67 children were killed, 71 women were killed, 150 children have become orphans only in the I mean, speaking about the last 11 days of aggression.
Right.
Well, the question shouldn't be how many. This shouldn't happen to one. One is too many.
Yeah, you're
Right.
totally right. Thank you for that. And I always like try to focus on that we're not numbers. Like in every number or every case that has been killed has a tragic story behind it. And the most tragic, like that I have seen, all of them are tragic, but the most tragic is lately one of the children that was born in Gaza. His mom passed away while delivering. Like this was around 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and his mom like passed away during his delivery, and his aunt took care of him. Like he was born as an orphan, and his auntie was taking care of him, and his aunt with the family were targeted during the last aggression. The only survival of the family was this child, and now he has become like during the aggression, the family were killed. The auntie was in at the hospital, and there was a hope that she will recover. But 2 weeks later, she passed away, or she was killed, sustained to the wounds that she has faced. And the tragic part is that this child has become an orphan for the second time within less than 5 years. Why should he face that?
And who has where's the child now?
Like some like with the relatives, like in Gaza, like when something happens like this, like the grandfather, the grandmother will take him. If not, then like if they're not around, they his aunt or his uncle will take care of him. So like he's with one of the family relatives at the moment.
So if we
So
wanted to
like,
help this child, we would be able to, right? Like through
yeah,
you, we would be able to.
no problem. I can guide you to him. And actually, as I mentioned, there are 150 children who have become orphaned only from this latest aggression on Gaza. And this is added to the thousands of orphaned children in Palestine. When I say orphaned children, not only I mean not the children that they become orphaned because their parents have passed away naturally, like they have become sick. No, they have become orphans because the Israeli have killed one or both of their parents.
And if 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 this was my situation, and if I was the person that was like the wali of this child, I would, first of all, the United Nations have condemned some of this weapon, the giving of weapons to the Israeli government because of what they do with it, and also the fact that there should be an investigation on war crimes. But if there's an investigation about war crimes, it's going to implicate the United States because they're selling the tools for war. But these children, someone should sue the United States on behalf of these children. The little boy that has no eyes, there are eye banks here. That child should be able to see. Everything else has been taken away. Give him a chance to see. But there's got to be a way that people become accountable for what they do. And you have to utilize the system any way you can. And if there's a way to sue anyone that even had a little bit of a role in it, then it should be done. Because I think you start where you can, and then maybe at the end, the finish will be bigger than what you thought. But these kids are orphans. They've lost everything. And at the end of the day, they want to take away their dignity too. That's too much.
Well, actually, to be honest, every single part in the lives of the people of Palestine is full of stories. Like if you want to speak about the children of Palestine, well, just just imagine that they are living in their being orphans. Others are being arrested every day at this moment. Like while we're speaking now, the children are being arrested in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Others are being tortured in jail. Others are being, their houses are being raided every night after midnight. Soldiers, tens of soldiers will storm the houses, will terrorize them at night, will destroy their houses, will destroy their properties, will search the house day and night. Children are being terrorized while they are going to school by the settlers, and like they will unleash the dogs against them, and they will follow them, terrorize them in the West Bank.
You're talking about children being tortured. How young are these children? No one should be tortured, but how young are some of these children that are being tortured?
You won't believe, there are some children that were only 5 years old. They were arrested. Soldiers, tens of soldiers with their military jeeps went to their houses, and they had arrest documents, and they needed to arrest those children. 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Teenagers are in the Israeli jails. At this moment, there are 400 Palestinian children in the Israeli jails. And besides, a few days ago, there was a lady, a media lady, that was arrested from the town of Sheikh Jarrah. Her name is from Halawani family. Like I'll get her name. So she was arrested for one night, like one full day and one full night, and then she was released. And she was speaking to the media, and she was saying that I was arrested and being put in the place that was like just opposite to the place of that they are holding children and they are arresting children. And once, like she said, like I'm old, like I'm aware of these things, but why the children? Like she said, like my heart was broken for those children that they were crying all night and they were calling for their families. 10 years old children, 11 years old, and 9 years old children. They were calling for their parents and they were crying all night and they needed their parents to be with them. Even the Israelis wouldn't allow lawyers to be in there. And this is one of the worst things, that after they like Palestinians are being arrested, of course there are no lawyers to attend there are no cameramen, there are no media to speak about this. They will torture the children, they will torture the women, and they will torture the Palestinian young men, and I mean the Palestinian men as well. Once they are in the jails, no one is watching them. And we have known, or we have heard those stories from them. They would deprive them from food, from drink for very long hours, for very long days during the investigation. They will put them in on those cells that are very small and won't be enough for someone to sleep, to stretch his body. Like if they want, if someone is in this cell, he would be just sitting and squeezing into the cell, and not having the freedom to sleep. There is no bed, no mattresses, no covers, no pillows, just the ground and the cell. And if they want to sleep even on the ground, they will be making very noise sound or noisy sound. They will be hitting the doors of the cell, and they will making very like violent voices to just to terrorize the children and the Palestinians there. Sometimes they, like we have heard the stories that they will put very strong lights inside the cell, into the faces of the children and into the faces of the Palestinians in the cell. And they say like they will be tearing all the time, and they will be closing their eyes. They are unable to open their eyes. Even if their eyes are closed, they still can't afford it, and they cannot. I mean, like if they close their eyes, it won't make it any better. It's just the same. It will be worse, or it will be just the same, as bad as it is. And they will put the lights into their faces for very long times, and they will deprive them from like to see the sunlight. They will be put into the dark cells for very long times and very long hours. Besides hanging them, they will handcuff them and then they will hang them from one hand, or sometimes handcuff them from both of their hands, and they will hang them for long hours. Some of them, the worst part is that they will put them into a flat chair, put their backs onto the chair, put their heads down from one side, their legs down from the other side. They will tie their legs to the chair's legs, and they will tie their hands, and then they will keep them this way for very long hours, and they will beat them while they are this way, and of course threaten them and assault them verbally and threaten them psychologically. So what's happening there behind the bars is something against the humanity. It
That's
doesn't
right.
respect the human rights.
Right. But those are also conditions that can induce psychosis, right? Not allowing somebody to sleep, not allowing them access to sunlight, not being able to tell if it's day or night, not being able to move, and causing, confusion like that can legitimately induce psychosis. And in children, the risk of, adverse mental health effects from these experiences is just huge. Are the Israelis giving any kind of justification for saying we've arrested a 5-year-old, we've arrested what is the excuse for arresting a child?
Yes, their excuse is that this child is throwing rocks. This child has participated in a demonstration against the Israeli policies that want to destroy their houses, or they want to confiscate or steal the Palestinian land. Like we see on TV every day that there are Palestinians who are gathering and protesting against the Israeli policies in the West Bank. And those every day there are threats, or there are threats that new houses are being stolen, new houses are being destroyed, new lands are being stolen for the Israeli settlement expansion, and Palestinians are protesting. So they are trying to impose those policies, and once the Palestinians are demonstrating or participating in these protests, then at night they will go to their houses and arrest them. So like they want to implement, or they want to pass those policies silently, without any reaction, without any refusal from the Palestinian side. And that's the only excuse, that they are arresting those children. Why else would they arrest them? And just to be honest, Israel doesn't need an excuse to arrest anyone, because as we mentioned earlier, that there is no one to hold them accountable. So they're doing whatever they want. And mostly, like they are doing this at night while there is no social media, or where is no media to cover this mostly. And this is happening every night. Every night, there are tens of Palestinians are being arrested in a very brutal way, inhumane way, in ways that are violating the international human rights. That is happening every day in Palestine. But the media, like they don't show this. What we see on social media, thanks to social media, that what we see during the day is that those social media activists are using their headphones, and everyone is using his platform just to try to spot the light on what's happening and try to share what's happening. And those footages and those pictures and those videos we are seeing every day that are coming from the West Bank, from Jerusalem, that's like mainly from the activists, from the social media activists, and the ones, the official journalists, they are being arrested and they are being assaulted as well. We have seen that 2 days ago, or last week, Jafar al-Budairi, Al Jazeera reporter, she was arrested from the town of Sheikh Jarrah while covering the Israeli assaults against the people and against the residents of the town of Sheikh Jarrah. And we have seen arresting Al-Halawani too, this lady I'm speaking about, and breaking the cameras of the journalists and assaulting the journalists as well, shooting them as well, suffocating from the tear gas that they are shooting against them. There are tens of violations against the journalists as well in the West Bank. That's happening mainly because they want to mute the voices that are covering or speaking for Palestine, and they want to mute the cameras and the personals that are speaking and transferring the image from the West Bank and the image from Palestine to the international community.
Well, we're seeing that here too on social media, is that people who are sharing videos or even having conversations or certain hashtags, some of whatever the metrics are that they screen for everything are starting to shut down accounts. There have been lots of reports of people who speak about any of the issues happening in Palestine that their accounts get shut down. But I think there has been with this last uprising, right, and increased violence, there has been more awareness here about what's going on. Like Maureen said, especially in the moms groups, I think we're seeing a lot in the local community groups, because of how much this has affected children, and because there has been this more awareness that their children are suffering, and nobody likes to see children suffer. So there are a lot more people in the US who are pushing back on this and who are writing to Biden. I know when he came out with his statement about everything that was going on, it was basically in support of Israel. There were many of us who wrote to the White House and said, no, you're not representing us. This is not okay. And I don't know how long it will take for public opinion to change policy, but I do know that there's growing awareness.
Yes,
Maybe.
thanks to social media for that. Like I know, and we have been following the protests that were taking place in the United States, in California, and Los Angeles, in New York. Those protests that were taking place during the days of the aggression, and even afterwards. Like we are watching it, and thanks to social media for that, that have enabled us to see such things. Even in the United States, let's say this was of the first time to happen that with this big number of Americans to come out to the streets in support of the people of Palestine, and that's because of the raise of awareness, and people have become aware and more aware of the daily events and the daily crimes that are being committed against the people of Palestine by the Israeli community. I just wanted to say the journalist I was speaking about, her name is Zain Al-Halawani. Zain Al-Halawani, that was arrested, and she was in front of the children, and she has seen the children, and I have seen her interview. The second day she was released, or the same day she was released, she was crying. Like she broke down, and she was crying while describing how the children were the children condition in the Israeli jails.
You know what I think some of the things we don't see is like when a woman is pregnant and she gives birth, she's arrested and she gives birth, and the Israeli her jailers will release her and keep the baby, and they don't give her the baby for maybe a couple of weeks. And you ask yourself, why would they do something like that? Because that's to torture her psychologically. She has a newborn, she's released, she's not allowed to take her baby home. This has not just happened once or twice, this has happened several points. Even at the checkpoints, women give birth, and sometimes they're released to go back home. Other times, they will separate the mother from the baby. These types of aggression and psychological torture are committed by monsters. It doesn't seem like one human being could do this to another human being. Who would arrest a 5-year-old child to snatch a 5-year-old child from their home and take them knowing that their parents are screaming and begging? Mothers beg these soldiers, please don't take my child. They're begging with their hands up, begging, and they're completely ignored. And they don't take the parents, but they will take a child. You have to ask yourself, what kind of monster has devised a plan like that takes a child away from the family like that for no reason? What could this child possibly do? It's outrageous.
I mean, we know what kind of monsters do that, right? Like, unfortunately, we're very familiar in the United States of what kind of people. It's the people who execute that plan, that's
At the moment, You're totally right. At the moment, there are 40, almost 40 women in the Israeli jails. Those 40 women who are sentenced that they have to spend years in the Israeli jail, and many of them were pregnant and they have delivered their babies inside the jail. And just imagine, like this child is coming to the world to be detained or to be arrested and not to be freed. What's like what sin has he done? And just don't look at him. Isn't it a humanitarian case just to make the lady to give pregnancy in a normal or in a suitable place like hospital and not the jail? Besides, there are tens of women whom are sick. And I remember, I have to mention this lady. Her name is she's from Ja'abi's family. She was driving her car and passing by one of the checkpoints, and then they shot at her, and like she was transferring from one house to another, so she's having like her house belongings, and one of the things she was having in the car is the gas pipe, yeah, the cooking gas pipe, and once they shot at her, the gas pipe has bombed, it exploded, and it burned her. And when it burned her, they arrested her and they were saying that she was committing suicide bomb. And of course, no, like this is by you. This has been done by you. And now her fingers are burned, totally burned, and they are sticking to each other, both of her hands. Her face has been destroyed and it's full of burns. And they are refusing to give her any medical treatment. And we all know when burns are happen to a person, the later the treatment, the less the achievement of the treatment will become, and of course the nerves will die, and I mean the skin cells are dying, and they are refusing to give her any treatment. I would like to share it. I just want to share one of her pictures here because it's like it's something totally inhumane by Israel.
So before you do, just for anybody who's watching, it's probably a good idea to give like a content warning that it's going to be graphic. And if you don't want to see, go ahead and skip forward a minute or so.
Okay, Hamza. Okay, Hamza, do you want to go ahead and you want to show us the pictures?
I just want to send it to you on WhatsApp, and then you can share it.
Okay, and
Okay, so
also if you could
you're
give
not
us,
sharing through your screen.
if you could give us the name and information of the lady, and maybe we could write someone on the Red Cross, the UN, any organization that might be able to intervene. If we have name and information, I promise you that we will do something. We will do something to advocate on her behalf, that she be given the rights of a human being. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for that. Her name is Isra Ja'abis, and she's a mother to children. And here I'm going to share with you some of her pictures. And there are pictures before and after she was arrested. Just give me a second, please.
Yeah, well, I'm just while
I
you're,
will have those
while you're doing, sure.
Yeah, just go ahead and ask. Like I'm trying to send the picture.
I think that first of all, in America, they've put such pressure on individual politicians not to say anything about the actions of the Israeli government. AOC was talking about the situation in Palestine last week in support of Ilham Omar, and they tried to just shut her down. These are representatives. They represent the voice of the people. They represent the voice of people in their community. And they have a right to say what they believe, and the people have a right to listen to it. This concept of ignoring, and this idea, this manner of ignoring or cutting freedom of speech is ridiculous to the point where people are afraid to even whisper. We cannot continue to let our politicians force us to practically whisper what our beliefs are. We need to stand up for our rights, for the rights of people everywhere, for the rights of a woman that's not being given humanitarian treatment. We've got to let our voices do what they were created to do, to sound off. And I promise you that we will do whatever we can.
I have sent the pictures are on your WhatsApp, Khalila.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So, Hamza.
Yes.
You can send me the rest later, and I'll make sure they're posted like they should be. And we'll tell the story and
Actually,
everything
if you
behind it.
need
But
details,
one of the questions.
sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
I was saying if you
Oh no,
need
you go ahead.
thank you. If you need details and if you need like stories about those women and those children in the Israeli jails, I'm ready to provide them. And if you need stories about the children in Gaza that were killed and have become orphaned, I'm ready to cooperate and to provide a story. Like if you are trying to send those to officials in the human rights, then I would be more than happy to share it with you.
And is there any risk of retaliation towards you for any of that? Are you safe?
Well, I'm sharing it as an activist or as a journalist. Like if like this is something well known in here. It's not secret. Like I'm not sharing secret information.
Mm-hmm. So that's, and Hamza will be back with us on part 2. Katie. But Hamza, I wanted to ask you a question about your life, you, and emotionally. I mean, it's a burden. It's a burden that comes with being an advocate. Like Katie just asked you, is it a danger to you? Well, a journalist, an activist, whether they can be in a building like the building in Gaza that I think it was Al Jazeera and
Yeah,
what's the
Burj
other?
Al Jala Tower that had Al
Mhm.
Jazeera office
And
and
A.
the American Associated Press office as well.
Right. So how does that, how do you feel after doing what you do? You do it on a daily basis. You've spoken to Canadian radio, Africa, and all over the world. There's a burden that comes with that. How do you feel? How does your family feel about you doing these things?
Actually, I'll be honest with you. In the aggression of 2014 against Gaza, I have spent 51 days of the war on Gaza, covering almost trying to cover all the news and all the events of what was going on in Gaza. I was going into field as well almost daily. I was working with some humanitarian charity works as well. And then at that time, like I was single. I know, like I was risking my life just to go there, but I was single. It's different now. I'm married and I'm a father to a son and a daughter, and this is the first time that there has been an aggression with this amount of bombs that we had faced. Like during the past years, we have seen escalations, like escalations for 1 or 2 days, and like I know I mean in Gaza, we know where the bombs are being bombed and where are the places that are being targeted. But for this time, honestly, I'll be honest with you that we have lived death literally. Personally, I have seen death many, many, many times. And me, my family, my wife, my children, we were preparing ourselves to die at any moment. My wife was fully dressed because if the house gets bombed, then once we are bombed and once we are targeted, our bodies would be covered. My children, my 3.5-year-old child, during the day, and he's listening to the bombs, then I was lying to him and I was telling him that don't worry, these are just toys and these are just games, and it's something normal. And once there is a bombing that I can see from the window, I will just take him and I'll tell him there are the games, just trying to make him like get released and not to be afraid. But afterwards, a few hours afterwards, whenever he hears any bombing, he would run to me and he's saying, "Oh, like, Dad, I'm afraid of the games. The games are fearful." So there's nothing to lie to him anymore, and I can't express to him what's going on. Even my 3.5 months, sorry, my 6 months daughter, she was crying every time that we have heard the bombings, and this aggression that for the first time, like they have done it before, but this is the first time that they are doing it with big numbers. They will target a family without even warning them. They will kill the whole family, bomb the house over the heads of its inhabitants. For the first time that with big numbers, they have arrested, they have targeted families of doctors, of surgeons in Gaza, physical doctors. They have arrested the houses, they have bombed the houses of media people, of media speakers. They have targeted the houses of normal people. And personally, I was expecting that our house to be bombed at any moment, and I had no place to go. I didn't have the chance. I didn't have any safe place to go. For any person around the world, where is the safest place to be? Your home. Our home wasn't safe. We haven't had any safe place to live. And I remember one of the nights, the bombing was so close. Like for me, like while I'm sitting here on this table, I would see like very far away from my window, and I have seen all the bombs that were just in the opposite way. There were bombs that were very close, the less than 500 meters away, and there was the days that there were successive bombs, more than 60 to 70 bombs at the same minute. Just imagine. And Israel has announced that they have used 63 warplanes and targeted 74 places in the same moment. And just imagine you are listening to 74 bombs at the same time, and the house is shaking. The children are screaming. My neighbors are screaming. The children are screaming everywhere, and the bombing is becoming very closer. And I was having my son into my arms. My wife was holding our daughter into her arms, and we were just waiting, and we were sitting next to each other because like if we are bombed, the rescue teams or the civil defense will find, like if they find someone, they will find the rest in the same place, because many times like they are suffering and rescuing the people or taking the people out of the rubble. On that night, I never forget that. I had a live session, or I had a live update on one of the TVs of Malaysia. And at that moment, they called me on Skype, and I I answered the call, the video call, and they have listened the bombs and they have seen us. And I said, sorry, I cannot be on TV now because I might get killed at any moment and I have to be with my family. So being a speaker on the stories and being a speaker on behalf of the Palestinians is, I know it's quite dangerous and it's a risk to take. But again, like if we don't speak, who else will know about it? And as I mentioned before, Israel doesn't need a reason to attack people, and it doesn't need any reason to kill the people. So whether we speak or not, we are being killed. Whether we speak or not, we are being assaulted. Whether we speak or not, we are being violated every day. Whether we speak or not, we are being bombed. So no, it's better to speak and tell the world and die with dignity instead of die with fear. And as I said in 2014, like I used to be a single, but now I have seen the fear into the faces of my children. My wife, my both children are being traumatized. Me too, like I'm still living the effect of the trauma. And to be honest, the most painful is not to live the pain, to describe the pain to the people. While I'm speaking those stories, like I'm living the pain and I'm trying to speak this pain to the people and try to convey the message and to deliver the message of people. And I have to say it every day, many times. I have to say it to some TVs, some radios, some journalists that call, and I have to write it to stories to journalists, and I have to write it on social media as well. So if a normal person needs to be treated from trauma, for me, I think like if they need 1 month, for me, I need months, not only 1 month. But till this moment, and to be honest, till this moment, after the aggression has ended on Gaza and the ceasefire is announced, I'm still, till this moment, being busy and occupied with sharing the stories with the media, and still don't I till this moment I still don't have any time for personal time or for family time. Honestly, I didn't leave. I didn't go any place for recreation with my family. Like every time I would ask her to go with her mom, with her sisters. I will ask her to go with my mom, with my sisters. And for me, I'm still busy. And like every time they will say, like, till when are you going to be busy with such things? And of course, again, if I don't speak and I have the ability to speak in English, who else is going to speak? And if we all
That's right.
don't speak, who's going to listen about us and who's going to know what's happening in here?
I,
And
th-
honestly, it's not easy.
I think for
I
a lot of
remember,
Americans, oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking for a lot of Americans, it was a shock, regardless if you agreed with his politics or not. But there was a man that was critical about the Israeli expansion and occupation. And he had an accident when he was a child. He couldn't walk. And he was in like a wheelchair. He couldn't even feed himself. All he had was his voice, literally. And the Israelis dropped a 2-ton bomb on him. His name was Sheikh Yassin, Ahmed Yassin. And the only thing Sheikh Yassin had was his voice. That's it.
yep,
But
he was
the voice,
totally paralyzed.
exactly, totally paralyzed. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead, Hamza. What
Yeah,
you were
I was saying that he was totally paralyzed, and he only had his voice.
Yeah, and that was a shock, I think, that why would someone drop a 2-ton bomb on a man being wheeled from the masjid from praying early in the morning? So I guess, these are concerns about advocates in Palestine like yourself who sacrifice their time and sacrifice the time with their families. It's a difficult choice, but like you said, someone has to do it. And we hope that we'll be able to make a contribution too, and that part two, you will be able to show us the type of contributions that we can bring to the table, and some of the cases that you know personally that have moved you, that affected people that you know. And our next show will be about that. Right.
بإذن الله.
Okay, anybody gonna do takeaways this time?
Katie?
I do. I'm still processing everything. Every time we hear these stories, it takes a while for it to sink into my brain, even though I know what's going on, and I've been following this for a while. It still takes a while to sort of sink in with everything that I hear. But what I heard most out of today's stories was the effective attachment disruption. So clinically, so Maureen and I are both mental health professionals. And clinically, we know that when you disrupt the attachment of a child, and it can be in many ways. It can be from parent death, it can be from physical separation. Certainly things like taking a newborn baby and not allowing that baby to be close to its mother for weeks. All of those things disrupt a child's attachment. And this causes problems in ways that they can relate to others, in ways that they view themselves, in ways that they see the world, and in their adult relationships, right? And so all I heard today was over and over and over this intentional attachment disruption for all of these children, and for you, things that you've lived through your entire life. So when you compound issues with a developing child with ongoing community trauma, right? Things that are happening. Your home may be safe because you have wonderful, loving family members. But if there's community violence, if it's not safe to go out of the streets at night, if you have to stay dressed so that, if something happens to you, you're found in a decent manner, this is trauma. So there's just layers and layers of trauma. And when this continues to happen, not only to one child, not only to 50 children, but to an entire generation in a country, many generations now, right? The effects of that are so long lasting beyond those individual lives. And actually, we know that trauma changes our genetic expression. So this is something that's going to continue, even if everything stopped today and things started to get better. The effects of what you described are going to continue affecting these children, these children's children, and these children's children's children. And that has to matter to people. So clinically, I'm just over here like shocked by what I'm hearing, right? And I've been thinking about, how do we get people to care more? How do we get people to do something more? Because it's very easy when you are not seeing this every day, or when you're removed, to say, oh, it's not my problem, or this isn't that bad, right? And I came across this the other day. There's a very well-known Buddhist monk named Pema Chodron, and she has this practice that's supposed to increase compassion and sort of lower distress and aggression and things like that. And it's this practice called Just Like Me. And you're supposed to think about this other person and what they're going through, and then follow it up with just like me. So what that would look like is, Palestinian children deserve to go to school safely, just like me. Palestinians deserve medical care, just like me. Palestinians deserve to go out at night, just like me. And when you say this over and over and over, eventually you start to have more compassion. So my takeaway is, as I'm watching these stories and as I'm continuing to learn more, I'm going to start using the Just Like Me practice, and I'm going to encourage anybody who's listening to do the same thing as well.
And I am having the appropriate emotional response for that practice, which is to be laid out straight by your description. And I really appreciate, Hamza, your willingness to bring that and really paint a very clear picture of what it looks like for you and your wife and your 3.5-year-old and your 6-month-old to sit huddled in your house and wait, together for death. Like, that's a pretty profound image. And it's going to stick with me for a little while. I hope until it stops happening in Palestine. And my hope is that for folks that are watching or listening, that you have a similar emotional response, because that's the thing that's going to make this different. We cannot change this until we see what's the humanity of what's happening. And Katie and I can intellectually understand what it means generationally for you all to be experiencing this. But I'm thinking, Hamza, that you've described your childhood, and you painted a very clear portrait of what it's like to be a 23-year-old and say, well, I'm really into making this better for my family and my friends. And the sort of relative risk assessment of a 23-year-old versus a 31-year-old married man, and how very dangerous this is. And yet it has to stop. It has to stop. And so my hope is that, folks can really feel this, because we should really feel it.
My hope, if there's one thing that I could get rid of, well, there's a lot of things, but one thing would be indifference. people refuse to like take a side. It's almost like being in a coma like state. They see and they watch, but they don't take a side. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to express what they know that they feel inside. And I know that majority, I believe in my heart, the majority of Americans in this country, they are against children being tortured, innocent people being tortured. They're against children being separated from their mothers. They're against these house raids. They know that they are against it. And they may feel powerless, but they do have power. We have power. We just have to believe that we have the power to use our power. And if we do that, if we can just change someone's destiny, the destiny of these kids, so that the next generation, they just don't have to grow up with what Hamza had to grow up with, then we will have been successful. So I just hope that we can get past indifference. And if we can do that, if we can send what we've learned today and what we're going to learn next week to every social activist group that we know to pass on, then we will play it forward, Hamza. We will.
Thank you so much. Actually, you're totally right. There is no one that should be in the gray area or in the white area. No one should be in the black in the gray area, whether white or black. And the right is very clear and obvious. And I think it's time to end the occupation on Palestine. Like the occupation is the longest ever in the history of the world. 73 years of occupation, 73 years are enough. We are in the 2020 and we are in the 21st century, and people are arriving to Mars, and we are still suffering from occupation here. People are advanced technology, and people are being civilized, and civilization and technology is racing time in all the world, but in Palestine it's not. People are still living 200 years behind because of the occupation. We only, why should I only, when I wake up in the morning, I should think of my children, I should think of my daily food, if I should think how to provide electricity. And I apologize to you, because like once we began, maybe you see the background was clear, but now it's already sunset and dark, but I'm using a LED light in front of my face, and its electricity is off. Like, why should I suffer of having 4 hours of electricity during the day, 4 to 6 hours of electricity during the day? Why should I think of providing the basic things for my family, for my relatives, for my people? Why should I worry about drinking water? And these things, people are in the world are never thinking about it. These things are basic things that are provided for animals and not only for humans. Why we in Palestine have to suffer and think of these things every day? Besides that, why should we live being rained by bombs every time and every time Israel wants to launch an aggression against the people of Gaza? And it's happening now in the West Bank, that they are stealing the town of Sheikh Jarrah, the town of Silwan, the other towns. Why now there are 7,850 people are threatened to be expelled from their houses? Why are we living another Nakba this year? Isn't it enough that we have lived the Nakba, the catastrophe of the 1948, when Israel has expelled people from their houses? Why are we living it again today? Why should we? Why should I worry about me being killed every moment? Not only me in person, but I mean as a Palestinian. Why should I worry that I will be arrested at any moment? Why should I worry that I won't be allowed from the freedom of movement, the freedom of traveling? If I get sick, why should I worry about not being treated well? And this is the minimum right that has been guaranteed by the human rights of the whole world to the people who are sick. Why when I get sick, I have to suffer whether die waiting for my approval to get the treatment in the West Bank or in Egypt or in Jerusalem? Why, as a Palestinian, I have to suffer the absence of my father, who's in Israeli jails for long years? Why, as a Palestinian, I have to fast the holy month of Ramadan as a Muslim without the presence of my father? Why should I celebrate the Eid or the Eid or the Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, the Muslim occasions in Palestine? Why, as a Palestinian, as a Christian, I'm not allowed to perform my pilgrimage in the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem? And I have seen tens and hundreds of Palestinians who are in Gaza, Christian Palestinians, the same as Muslims here. They are Palestinians. They are not allowed to go perform their pilgrimage in the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, in the West Bank. They are not allowed. Why, as a Christian, I am not allowed to visit my church in Jerusalem and be assaulted and be attacked and be arrested as well? Why we as Palestinians have to worry about these things every day, while the whole world, they wake up, they just think of sending their children to school with the school bus or driving them with their own cars to school. Then they go to their jobs. At the end of the day, they will go hang out with their friends, and then they will have the night parties with everyone. These things we never think about. We only think about of providing our food on a daily basis as Palestinians. And if I know hundreds of Palestinians, hundreds of thousands, as unemployment rate has exceeded 65% in Gaza, and poverty rate has exceeded more than 80% in Palestine generally. Why we as Palestinians have to worry about of providing the basic food every day, the drinking water? The United Nations, the OCHA, I think, OCHA has announced that 97% of the drinking water in Gaza is unsuitable for drinking. And the United Nations also has announced that Gaza by 2020 or 2021 is not a safe place to be inhabited. And why are we still living that by the procedures imposed by the Israeli occupation? I think we have to live in peace, and it's enough of those days that we have seen. My father used to live in Be'er Saba, and he was born there. And during the 1948 Nakba, he had to flee with his father, with my grandfather, from there under the assault of the occupation, and they moved to Gaza. I was born as a refugee. Why shouldn't I have the right to visit my own land and to live in my own land that my grandfather was wiped from there? I think it's enough of what we have lived, my parents, my grandparents, and our generation. I always pray and I hope that my children wouldn't live the suffering as we live and wouldn't see anything of what I have seen in my life. Because of the 30 years I have seen in my life, I'm sure there are people, if they live 200 years in different countries, they will never see 10% of what we have seen in our life. And again, I hope it's time to end the occupation and to bring peace, because the first day of peace is the last day of the occupation.